fix my lights. And if you break my lights... All right, are we ready to go? All right, Psalm 23, if you would. And then I'm going to read the Second Amendment. Those of you that are watching this on live stream, today is a special day. It's Old-Fashioned Sunday. I don't normally come up and preach in blue jeans or a cowboy hat. But I'm comfortable enough where I might start doing that. But I'll have to wear my gun to go with my cowboy hat. And so anyways, special day. And today, of course, is Second Amendment Sunday. We've been looking all through the month of July as our Freedom Month. And we've read the Declaration of Independence. We did the preamble to the Constitution. Last week was the First Amendment. This week will be the Second Amendment. So I'll read that here in just a moment. And then we'll get into the Word of God. And just see what the Word of God has to say about, well, since we're talking about the Second Amendment, we're going to look and see what it says about weapons. Are there any weapons in the Scriptures? Are there any projectile weapons in the Scriptures? And we'll answer those questions from the Bible, but, you know, there's a couple other passages we're going to go to. The Second Amendment says this: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And so I'm all about bearing arms. And I'm all about shall not be infringed. Those are rights given to us in our Constitution, in this Bill of Rights. Those are rights given to every single American citizen. Now, so many people will say, well, you know, guns kill people. No, guns don't kill people. People holding guns kill people. But also, how many people die because of drunk drivers? But we don't see a big push in Congress about drunk drivers and getting cars off of the street. Or alcohol or drugs. We don't see, let's see, what's another cause of death in America? Yeah, cell phones. We don't see cell phones taken away from people that are texting and driving, or texting and doing something else, texting and walking in the middle of the street. There's not a push in Congress to have those taken away. And you want to know the reason why? Because those items are not listed in the Constitution. The priority, it seems, is those things that are written in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. They are trying to strip those away from us. Freedom of speech. Now there's certain things that we can't say. We talked about this last week. Some things are classified as hate speech. By the way, I'm not for hate speech, but I'm not for regulating it either. They're trying to regulate out our Constitution. Because if they can tear up that document, then there's so many things that they could do to us, not for us. And so we need to be careful. And so I'm all about Second Amendment. I'm all about keeping it. I am for American citizens to legally own weapons. And I'm all for American citizens legally carrying weapons. I'm for it. And I'm going to show you from the Scriptures that I believe God's for it too. And I don't have to do any twisting. I don't have to do any, you know, have you ever heard anybody, you know, online or on TV or on a radio or something try to prove a point, and then they had to do a whole kind of twisting of the Scriptures and everything? Well, we're going to look in context at some Scriptures, and then you guys help me out. Tell me if you see a weapon here or not. All right, I'm in the 23rd Psalm. Isn't that where I asked you to go, was the 23rd Psalm? How many of you think the 23rd Psalm is a beautiful psalm? Amen. You know, it is, isn't it? The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. And it's just beautiful. And usually we'll read these at somebody's memorial service or funeral, or if it's a solemn occasion or a beautiful occasion, we'll read Psalm 23, won't we? And it's just a lovely psalm. Do you guys know there's a weapon listed in there? All right, you're looking at it, Psalm 23. We'll start in verse number 1. And when I say the word, I'm going to say it out loud. I'm going to say it louder than I say any other word, and you'll see the weapon. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in paths of He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, I mentioned the rod here. The rod is one weapon that God gave to shepherds. A shepherd carries two tools with him. One is the staff. That's that hook thing that you guys normally see a shepherd carrying. That's so that he can flip it upside down, grab the hook, and hook a lamb that may have fallen down into a crevice, hook a lamb that has fallen down somewhere else and be able to lift him up. There's also sheep that are called cast sheep. They get all these briars and stickers and branches and stuff, or too much wool in their wool, and they just end up on their backside and their legs are sticking up like this. And sometimes the shepherd will take that staff and he'll grab it and he'll prop it up. He'll straighten them out. But then there's the rod. And the rod is a staff, and it's about yay big, and it's taken from the heart of a certain tree. So they cut off the trunk of a tree, and then they get down into the middle of that log that's left, and the shepherd himself will fashion his rod. And the top of the rod will usually be a ball about this size. And then it will go down to like a cane. And so you'll see a shepherd carrying a rod, and he'll usually carry it like this, or sometimes he'll carry it ball side down, and he'll be carrying the other side. But he uses that as a banging weapon. So let's say a wolf comes up into his pack, coyotes come up into his flock, and he's going to beat them off. It's a hitting weapon. But it's also a throwing weapon. He'll take that weapon and he'll fling it at something with that big ball head at whatever animal it is that's attacking his flock. That's his weapon that he is given. And so in the most beautiful psalm that we have written in the scriptures, we see thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. And by the way, when we did a study on the 23rd Psalm years ago, we also found out that as the shepherd walks, he has a favorite sheep. In his flock, there'll be his one sheep that's his favorite sheep. And he'll take that rod and he'll just rest it on the side of that sheep. And that's almost like physical contact. All right, husbands, wives, you like walking around holding hands? Okay, my wife likes to hold my hand.
You got anything else?
We'll walk through a store and we're holding hands. We'll walk from the car to somewhere and she'll come up beside me and we'll just start holding hands and going on. It's the same idea as the rod. And so when it says here, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me, that's the shepherd just resting that rod on his favorite sheep, and they'll just walk wherever the flock is going. So when it says thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me, it's his weapon and his helping tool. They comfort me. And that's what it is. How would you guys feel if, say Jesus Christ walked into the room and he pulled his sword out and he just rested his sword on you?
Oh, yeah.
How would you guys feel about that? You say, and I'm surprised not one of you has said, you say, Jesus Christ has a sword? We'll get to that in a minute. All right, are there projectile weapons in the Bible? All right, if you can see me when I step out from here, I am wearing a projectile weapon on my hip. All right, are there such a things as projectile weapons in the Scriptures? Well, we're going to look at one account, and then I'll tell you we'll point out another account of it as well. 1 Samuel chapter 17. 1 Samuel chapter 17. And I'm really going to pick this up in the middle of the story. But this is the account of David and Goliath. All right, David is at home, and his brothers are at war. And, of course, the Philistines are on one side of a valley, and the Jews are on the other side of the valley. And there's this one Philistine that comes out every morning. I defy the God of the Jews, and you send out you a champion, and I'll come out, and the two of us will fight, and whoever wins, they get to be the winner of the day. That way we don't have to kill everybody. And whoever wins gets to be the victor, and the losers have to be our servants. And David's dad, Jesse, sends David to his older brothers that are in this battle. And so David is bringing, a gift for their captain, and then some food for the brothers, and so on and so forth. And as David is there and he's hearing, talking to the men there, David hears this roar, this bellow. I defy the living God of the armies of the Jews, or something. It's something along those lines. And then he bellows out his challenge again, and David's ears perk up. And he's like, what? Why are you letting him talk like that? And he's speaking to the men. And now his brothers show up. And his brothers start chiding him. Who'd you leave those few little sheep with? By the way, those are the same sheep that he's about to testify to Saul that he killed a bear with his bare hands and a lion with his bare hands for those few little sheep. And we know why you're here, the naughtiness of your heart and all this, blah, blah, blah. And David said, is there not a cause? And he's brought before Saul and tells Saul about the lion and the bear. And Saul tries to put his armor on him. And David can't walk because Saul's head and shoulders above everybody else. And David's a 16-year-old lad. And so he sloughs that off. And then we'll pick up the account in verse number 40. So 1 Samuel 17 and verse number 40, he took his staff in his hand and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook and put them in a shepherd's bag which he had, even in a scrip, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. And the Philistine came on and drew near to David. Now, do you remember the description of Goliath? He's 9.5 feet tall when we convert it. And David is 16 and a lad. Philistine has a full-grown man that holds his shield. He has a shield bearer. And so I'm sure that the shield covers the guy. It's taller than the guy. So that it can protect Goliath, who's 3 feet taller than your average man. I'm right at 6 feet. And so Goliath is 3 feet taller than me. So if you put Monica on my shoulders, that's how... If you put Alan on my shoulders, that's how tall Goliath would be. And the Philistine came on and drew near to David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy and of a fair countenance. So there's a pretty boy standing in front of him. And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee. What has he got in his hand? He's got a staff and his sling. All right? Now, can either one of those remove a head? We'll get to that in a second. No, is the answer. This day will the Lord deliver my hand to smite thee and take thy head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day to the fowls of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there's a God in Israel. David is but 16 years old, and he's speaking to this warrior who's 9.5 feet tall. He's got a shield bearer in front of him. The guy probably has scars all over him from being in battle after battle after battle, and here's a pretty boy. And the only thing that he has in his hands is a staff and a little sling. And what does David say? You're a dead man. Not only you, but all the rest of the guys standing behind you are dead men. Why? Not because of me, but because there's a God in Israel. By the way, should you mess around with Israel? A little side note here. Should you be launching rockets into Israel? I'd call that dumb. I'd say that's dumb. Just don't do it. All right, let's get back. Verse 47, And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David did what? Yeah, he hasted. And then what? Ran which way? Toward him. So a little skinny 16-year-old shepherd boy with a staff and a sling running towards a 9.5-foot tall battle-hardened giant with a shield bearer. Came to pass, the Philistine arose and came nigh to meet David, and David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. David put his hand in his bag and took thence a stone and slang it, and smote the Philistine in the forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. Are there projectile weapons in the Scriptures? Well, we just saw one. By the way, let me tell you what I think happened in the spiritual realm. I believe there was an angel. David's slinging like this, and David lets go of his sling and launches that rock out. And you know what I think happened in the spiritual realm? An angel took his finger and flicked that rock. Put a little more oomph in it. Because think about it, this battle-hardened giant with a shield bearer in front of him probably was wearing his battle helmet. And that helmet is made to protect him from men swinging swords at his head. And what does it say happened with the stone? It hit him in the forehead. By the way, you know where his helmet is? It's over his forehead. But it hit his helmet so hard that it went into his forehead, and then it says, and it's sunk in. Do you guys see that? Do you think a little skinny, little 16-year-old boy is able to sling a stone so hard that it would hit a soldier's helmet, go through it, and then sink into his forehead and make him fall down? I believe in the spiritual realm, An angel did this and just flicked it. Just flicked the rock. Have you ever taken something in your finger like this and flicked it like little rocks, or you like I'll flick little toys at my grandbabies and get their flick, just. Have you ever done anything like that? Just imagine in the spirit realm. Hard enough for that projectile to go fast enough to sink in through that guy's helmet, and then banged into his head. And then David ran up on him. I'm going to kind of sum up the rest of the story. David ran up on his body, grabbed Goliath's sword, which had to have been as tall as David, and he hefted that thing up and took off Goliath's head right then. And what did the army do behind him? They didn't run towards David, who was the 16-year-old little boy. They ran the other direction. What did the army of Israel do? They ran too. But you know what direction they ran? They ran after the Philistines. Because they also saw that there was a God in Israel. That helped a little 16-year-old boy defeat the giant that every one of them was cowering from, and even Saul was cowering from. They saw there was a God in Israel. All right, you say, but that's one account of projectile weapons in the Scriptures. Go to Judges chapter 20. Judges chapter 20. Oh, my Coke is over. My Diet Coke is done, so message will be done in 2 minutes. Judges chapter 20 and verse 16. It's just giving us a list here of soldiers. Judges chapter 20 and verse number 16. All the people, there were 700 chosen men left-handed, and everyone could sling stones at an hair breadth and not miss. So two things I see here. I see everybody was a left-hander, and they slang stones. That almost sounds like projectile weapons in the Scriptures. And they could hit a hair. So we would take Angela's hair, Stephanie's hair, lady's hair, and we just put it between a couple of little pinches like this, and they would sling stones at it, left-handed, and break the hair every time. That's pretty good, don't you think? All right, and then I mentioned just a moment ago Jesus Christ having a sword. Do you guys believe that? Well, okay, you guys are going to say that because I'm about to prove it to you, and you know that. Judges chapter 5. I'm sorry, Joshua chapter 5. Joshua chapter 5. Joshua is about to lead the army, or lead the people, the children of Israel, over the Jordan River and go into the promised land. Joshua chapter 5 and verse 13. Joshua 5 verse 13, it came to pass when Joshua was by Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with the sword drawn in his hand. So how's he standing there? Sword in his hand. All right? And Joshua went unto him and said unto him, Art thou for us or for our adversaries? And he said, Nay, but as the captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. Now, that's a military term. Captain of the host of the Lord. Anytime you see the captain of the host, the Lord of hosts, that's a military statement. The host meaning the host of the armies in heaven. So this is the captain of the host of the Lord, am I now come? Well, that doesn't tell us that that's Jesus Christ. But this next couple of verses do. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and did worship, and said unto him, What saith my Lord unto his servant? Now, if this was just an angel, the angel would have said, Get up. He said, You don't worship me, you worship the Lord only. You get up. And if it was another man, He would have said, get up. You don't worship me, you just worship the Lord. I am a man just like you are. But what does this person say? And the captain of the Lord's host said unto Joshua, loose thy shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy. And Joshua did so. Who else said that very phrase? By the way, Jesus Christ in the burning bush said the very words to Moses, remove thy shoes from off thy feet, for the ground that thou standest on is holy. Where the angel stands is not holy. They're reflectors. The one that's holy and the one that makes the ground holy is the Lord. And so the Lord, being the captain of the host of the Lord, standing there with his sword drawn, and he says, remove your shoe from off your foot, because the ground that thou standest on is holy. Who's that? Jesus Christ standing there with the sword drawn in his hand. Now, again, I'll ask you this. Do you want, if Jesus was to come in here, would you want him to pull his sword and just kind of lay it on your shoulder? And you could say to him from the 23rd Psalm, thy sword comforts me. Are you comforted in that? So the question is, since Jesus Christ has a sword, since the angels have a sword, there are other accounts speaking of angels standing there with their swords drawn. Since there are weapons in heaven, why is it that we get the idea that we shouldn't have weapons in a church? Because what is the church? All right, the church is the people of God. When we gather together, the building isn't anything. We call this the house of God or the church of God or the church house. We call it different things. This is just where the church gathers. But where do we get the idea if in heaven there are weapons? Where do we get the idea that in church we shouldn't have things like that? Where's that idea come from? I'm going to share that with you in just a second. By the way, speaking of, there's that phrase, and then I have another statement that I put down. We've changed a kingly Jesus into a cowardly, effeminate Jesus. Have you guys seen that picture? Where he's got 3 little stripes across his chest, and he's all effeminate and everything, with his little heart and all of that. By the way, that's very Catholic. But they make him an effeminate man. What did Jesus do before he went into public ministry? Do you remember what Jesus' job was? He was the carpenter's apprentice, wasn't he? His dad was the carpenter, and Jesus was the oldest. And you know what Jesus' job was? Hey, Jesus, go get me that log. You know, when I'm the craftsman and I have my boys around me, my boys are the tool getters, the wood getters, the gophers. They go get my Diet Coke. They go do all of that stuff. That's what they're the gophers. You know what Jesus was? He was the gopher. Do you think he was just a little weakly, effeminate guy picking up logs and stuff? Well, Dad, I can't bring this log to you because it's too heavy. Do you think that was him? He was able to heft those things up and carry them to him. He was able to saw those logs. He was able to form those logs into boards. He was able to do anything that his dad asked him to do on that wood with those tools. He was probably pretty well built. And so they changed his form to the form of a cowardly, effeminate thing. You guys remember when he went into the temple and overthrew all the tables? What did he have in his hand? Yeah, it's called it was a cord of something. He had a cord small cords, yeah. A scourge of small cords, is what it's called. So in his hand, he had a little beating weapon. and he went into the temple, and he chased out all of those that were selling things in the temple and flipped over money changing tables and ran them all off, and all he had in his hand was a little scourge of cords. You remember those What Would Jesus Do bracelets? WWJD? Hey, when you think about what would Jesus do, flipping tables and chasing people out of his house with a scourge of cords in his hand is not beyond the realm of possibilities. Last place I want to look, we've two places really. We've changed the church, the pillar of ground of truth, into a weekend entertainment center. In 1 Timothy 3:15, don't turn there, let me read it to you, but write it down. 1 Timothy 3:15. But if I tarry long, that thou mayest know how thou oughtest to behave in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and ground of truth. We don't come in here and dance around, flop on the floor, and we certainly don't worship an effeminate God in his house. But how is it we got there? How is it we got there? Oh man, oh no. 1 Peter, last verse, 1 Peter 2:5, 3:5. Why does 3:5 sound right? No. Oh, the devil as a roaring lion walketh about, seeking whom he may devour.
1 Peter 5:12, I think. No, 2 Peter 4:12. It's in here, I know it is.
5:8, thank you. I heard it in the background. 1 Peter 5:8. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. You know how we've gotten where we've changed the church of the living God, the pillar and ground of the truth, and we've changed it into an entertainment center? It's because we have an enemy. You know how it is that we got into the church and we worship an effeminate Jesus Christ? It's because we've got an enemy. You know why it is we come up with ridiculous ideas like Christians shouldn't own weapons or shouldn't carry weapons? Do you think, you know how we got to ideas like that? That Christians ought to not protect themselves? You know how we got an idea like that? Because there's an enemy. And you know what the next verse says? Whom resist steadfastly. So as long as I'm here, over there, but here, in this place over there, you know what I'm saying? I'm going to be preaching the pastor of this church, no matter the location. The preaching is going to be not about an effeminate Jesus Christ, and it's not going to be about entertainment, and it's certainly not going to be about giving up rights as Americans. Those go hand in hand. And if the Lord says, and if the Lord has weapons in heaven, then certainly it's okay to have weapons in his house. Because if it's in his house, it can be in his house. And so on this Second Amendment Sunday, you know, as Christians, we are, as Christians and as Americans, we are allowed to be part of a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. We are allowed and encouraged. By the way, you know, as the shepherd of this church, do you think it's my job to protect this flock?
Yes.
Is that true or not?
Yes, it is.
And how am I going to protect this flock if, you know, somebody wanted to come in like we've seen at other churches in America? Somebody has come in and started shooting. How am I going to be able to protect the flock if we have the idea, well, that's just the opposite of what the God of love is, because Jesus, he's love. By the way, he is. I'm not against that. He is, but not in that tone. He's also holy and righteous. He's also holy and righteous. And there's an enemy. We need to remember there's an enemy. And we need to be praying against that enemy and resisting that enemy and the thoughts that he puts in. All right, let's stand to our feet with our heads bowed and eyes closed. Jordan's going to put on a hymn of invitation.